Te Korowai Waiheke Trust was established in 2018 with the aim to eradicate predators from Waiheke, working towards the world's first predator-free urban island. The first part of the program is an island-wide stoat eradication, and that's followed by a rat eradication pilot. Waiheke has this incredibly diverse community. It's very much a people project, with people that live on the island full-time, with people that come to Waiheke for holidays, with iwi, there's a lot of businesses and more than 1 million tourists a year.
I spend a lot of time working to eradicate pests and including my children in that. They just have a chance to become extremely knowledgeable, and kids are very good at sharing their knowledge with others.
Customers are proactively coming to us, asking about our sustainability credentials, asking what kind of business we are and how light our footprint is. Sustainability and having a really good environmental footprint is fundamentally important to tourism businesses nowadays.
All the people that live on the island, like us, are kaitiaki. So if it's about looking after the island, let's do that.
Being part of this initiative, yeah, it's very exciting. What I would like to see for the future is a lot more bird life and a lot more native bird song.
I think the really exciting and unique thing about this project is that it's about people working together with the natural environment. So everyone is doing their bit to help restore our island song.
All right, I'm going to flick over now, if that's okay, Mary, to the presentation. I'm going to sit back, and I know Paul is as well, and away you go.
Thanks, Nick. Just a bit of background. Te Korowai or Waiheke, the name, translates as the cloak of Waiheke. And a Korowai is a traditional cloak that's usually given to someone or something of significance. In this case, it's Waiheke, the island itself. And also it's symbolic because in order to create a Korowai, you have to weave individual threads together, which is the act of whatu, and that is symbolic of how, in order for our project to succeed, we all need to weave together our individual threads collaboratively. So you can see on the screen a bit of history. Waiheke's got quite a history in environmentalism. In fact, it was a local school teacher and some school kids that delivered the first successful eradication in New Zealand at neighbouring Maria Island in 1960. And Waiheke is also the first place to declare itself nuclear free. Locals aren't shy to speak their mind and don't shy away from a challenge. And so here we find ourselves wanting to create the world's first predator-free urban island. So our project's really been founded on decades, in fact generations, of predator control on Waiheke, and we know that nowadays over 60% of the local community are actively controlling predators, and there are close to 1,000 volunteers in community groups across the island, which for a small community is really significant. Te Korowai is a project of the Waiheke Collective, which is an informal network of people and organisations that are committed to working together for bettering a healthy and thriving natural Waiheke environment. The collective put together funding applications to our three wonderful funders. You see the logos at the bottom there: Auckland Council, Predator Free 2050 Limited and Foundation North. And in 2018, a new community charitable trust was formed, Te Korowai or Waiheke. And the scope of our work is an island-wide stoat eradication, which went operational earlier this year, and a rat eradication pilot in time to come. So we're really lucky, being a community-led project. We've got really great community support, and we've got the locals, swerve hopefully safely in their cars to pull over and talk to the field team when they're out and about and checking the traps, and keen for a conversation and keen to talk about what everyone's doing at their own homes, and keen to ask for some advice as well. And what we also know is that most people in Waiheke are doing predator control, in fact, to better attract birds or other wildlife, and we know that that's significant because other communities may have other motivations, such as protecting private properties or preventing predator or pest infestations. So on Waiheke, it's very much about doing what we can for the environment. Here are some stats about Waiheke. So we have a resident population full-time, people living full-time on the island of over 9,000, and that actually swells to more than 50,000 in the summer months as holiday makers and batch owners return to enjoy time on the island. In addition to that, we have more than 1 million tourists a year, and it's not just about the numbers. People are at the centre of this project. They're our biggest challenge, but also our biggest opportunity. And our local community are reporting stoat sightings. They're donating rabbits that they might have shot for bait for the stoat traps, and providing lots of goods or services in kind or pro bono to support the project. Anything from communications assistance, messages on social media, or pro bono legal advice as well. Waiheke is also really well known for diversity. We've got some of the lowest incomes in the region, and literally some of the richest people in the country that all have a place in the Waiheke community. As I said, some live permanently on Waiheke, others like me are part-timers. And we've got a large range of ethnicities and backgrounds, including a significant Argentinian community, actually, which has really helped the local football team. We're also quite a transient community. Many people come and stay only for a few years, which means that for community volunteers, there's often quite a high turnover, as much as 50% turnover in a couple of years. Rat control volunteers. So while our mission is about eradicating predators from Waiheke, the social benefits are really, really important as well. The project is bringing people together. It cuts across the diversity. It brings economic benefit. Most of the people employed or contracted to the project are all locals, and helps with resilience as well. And here's some of our ecological context. So Waiheke sits within Te Kapa Moana, the Hauraki Gulf Marine Park. Waiheke is the island that is just below the words Hauraki Gulf there, the dark green island with the lighter green Rangitoto and Motutapu on the left-hand side. The Hauraki Gulf, Te Kapa Moana, is known internationally as a global seabird hotspot. And Waiheke is an island that is the second largest island in the Gulf, which brings really important ecological opportunities. And it also sits on a seabird superhighway between the Coromandel Peninsula and mainland Auckland. And of course, seabirds need safe land to breed on, just like forest birds do. So our project is going to be helping them to have that. Here's another map a bit closer up, Waiheke in the inner Gulf. And since Maria Island, there's been more than 100 eradications around the country. And in the Hauraki Gulf alone, there are 44 of the 50 or so islands that are now predator-free. And you can see these in light green, and they really surround Waiheke. In fact, Waiheke is a bit of a threat. The predators in Waiheke are a bit of a threat to the other islands. And so we're really fortunate because in terms of an eradication program, we're lucky that our biosecurity is helped with a large moat around the island, but also a significant biosecurity program, Pest-Free Hauraki Gulf, which is supporting things like pest-free warrants on commercial vessels and ferries, and working with boaties to help reduce that biosecurity risk. So the ecological context of Waiheke is both terrestrial and marine. And on the island itself, there's quite a variety of habitats, as you would have seen in the video, including coastal forest, inland forest, regenerating forest, wetlands, quite a lot of wetlands on Waiheke, rural, open pasture, and urban, suburban and industrial. So we've been establishing and operational for just over a year now. Last year, initial staff came on board in February, March, April. Started with the stoat eradication planning. Field team came on board a bit later in the year, and we installed traps in December last year. January and February saw us pre-baiting, and we opened traps on February the 24th, which was a really exciting day. Unfortunately, we have had to put the project on hold, as many have. Not less than a month later, March 24th and 25th, we closed the traps across the island in what was a mammoth effort by everyone, closing all the traps in 48 hours. So the eradication itself, just a quick overview. It's a trap-based program over 2 years, followed by a 2-year confirmation period over a large variety of land types, as I've already mentioned. We're using DOC 200 traps, double set, single set, and there's approximately 1 trap per 6 hectares. Other tools in our toolbox as well, detection dogs and trail cameras and the like. So before we could install the traps, we of course needed to have permission from a range of stoat trap hosts. And given some of the complexity that we're dealing with, what we found was that door knocking had limited success for us, given that almost half of our landowners aren't living on Waiheke permanently, and also just trying to track people down was problematic. You can see there 46% of our landowners or our properties are trusts or companies. So actually finding a name was difficult in itself. So the team had to really become detectives and leave letters around and use neighbourhood networks and, use friends and families as well. So I mentioned that the community is contributing awesomely with reporting stoat sightings and dropping off rabbits for bait. They also help us to understand our local bird populations on Waiheke by logging bird sightings and eBird, support us on social media and volunteer at events. But as well as that, there's quite direct support with many people involved in the delivery of the program itself. So they're quite small, but each of the dots here that you see represents a trap on the island, and each of the different colours represents a different delivery partner. So the team have had to be really flexible to be able to accommodate all the different needs and approaches with the delivery partners, and ensuring, of course, that the delivery standard is consistent right across the island. And so this is where a robust data management system is really helping us. And so you can see here in this slide, that's just another view of the variety of delivery partners that we have. Within each of those groups, we've got, our own staff and volunteer and contractor field team. And then you can see large farms who are using their own staff to deliver the program, the regional park who have both staff and volunteers, and other contractor delivery, as well as a fantastic community project as well. And at this point, I'd just actually like to acknowledge all of these incredible people. It's been, as I said, a bit of a whirlwind. A huge amount of work has gone in. The summer was incredibly hot, and Waiheke, of course, has had to contend with quite a drought. You might have heard about the water restrictions in Auckland recently. The tank levels have been low all summer, and of course that really impacts on our big farms as well. And then, a month after starting up, we had to put the program on hold, but we're really looking forward to being able to restart very soon, hopefully. So I'd like to hand over to Paul, and who's going to tell you a bit more about the data management system.
Hi, everyone. Let's see if I can get this working. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about the planning, implementation and tracking of the project, and how we use GIS, or Geographical Information Systems, and data management. It is still early days, but I'll touch on primarily planning, implementation, and tracking, and maybe a little bit of analysis as well. It is a big rabbit warren to get into, talking about data management. I'm trying to keep it as light as possible. It's all I've got as many maps and graphs in there to keep things interesting. And I understand it's dinner time, and hopefully it keeps you all awake while you're having your lockdown life. So for those who don't know what a GIS or Geographical Information System is, basically all it is just mapping layers, and we analyse how the data within those layers relate to each other. And we all use one. Well, most of us would use one almost every day. Google Maps is one, for instance. You know, we switch on a layer, a satellite layer, for instance, we switch it off. If we want to know where the closest pub or playground is, hopefully we can go to those two places next week. You know, we do a quick analysis, and it gives us, you know, the distance to the closest pub or playground. So, you know, that's at some core function. That's what a GIS is. So I'll just get straight into the planning, and at this point, I probably should acknowledge Jo Ritchie, our operations manager, and the amount of incredible work she put into actually creating the eradication plan in conjunction with and collaboration with a lot of community projects on the island and experts around the country. So in terms of the planning, what we start with is a blank canvas like this. This is Waiheke Island, and as Mary mentioned, the plan is based on a 1 trap per hectare system across Waiheke. And if you look at that, this is a grid, and each one of those squares is 1 hectares. Now, at this point, you could put in a trap in the middle somewhere, but unfortunately, Waiheke isn't a homogeneous blank canvas, and stoats don't necessarily move equally across an area. So the next step we did was we looked at line features. And line features are things like tracks, streams, vegetation boundaries, where stoats are probably more likely to follow, you know, things that make it easier for them to travel. And it sort of makes sense that if that's where a stoat is travelling, then it would make sense to put a trap right there to increase the visitation of a stoat to get caught. And then we put in the traps. Now, each one of these green and yellow dots is a trap. And bear in mind, this is still within the desktop planning phase. And we integrated the projects that were currently underway across the island, and that includes our Whakaniwha Regional Park and a project run by the Waiheke Collective Stoat Project. And they're the dots you see in yellow. You can also see a number of points to the west of the island as well, and there's some private stoat trapping projects. Now, normally you would think, okay, if this would be a great time to go and ground truth and think about the logistics of where we're actually going to place the traps, and that being, you know, along tracks where you might move a point a bit closer to a track, which might make things, you know, more efficient. But we had to add on another layer, and that layer being properties and property boundaries. And you can see here all the red lines are property boundaries. And this at this point is when we actually went out and did the door knocking and the sleuthing, as Mary put it, to actually ask landowners whether they would be happy to have the traps on their property. And here's another sort of overlay that we consider during the planning phase. This here is a visualization of what's called the raster. And basically all this is showing is the risk of it's basically a relative risk map. And the relative risk map that we have developed is based on vegetation types, from green, so a low risk, to red, a high risk. And the low risk green areas are things like pastures where stoats are not likely to inhabit too much. They might travel through those areas, but they may not, be densely populated in there. To the high risk, which is more like the warm forests that you find, like Karri Potter Cup forest, and that seems to be more towards the south east of the island. So after this, we went out, did the ground truthing, spoke to landowners, moved traps, and this is the current layout of the project. It's much the same as the map Mary showed you. The difference in colours here is just showing the trap types. So we've got white, which is DOC 200 singles in the plastic trapinator boxes. The yellow dots are DOC 200 singles in wooden boxes, which most of you would be very familiar with. And the red dots are DOC 200 doubles, so 2 traps within a wooden box. And if you think back to that last slide, where we had quite a lot of high-risk vegetation areas, so areas where stoats might be more likely to inhabit, that's towards the eastern end of the island. And that's where we've sort of tried to target the area with double sets, mainly because they've shown to increase efficacy in catches. So from there, we obviously wanted to implement the project. And there are many products out there and that we could have used, but we were looking for something where we could implement, plan, track, analyse, and try to be as seamless as possible. And the data requirements that we needed were obviously location traps and tracking records. That's pretty standard across all trapping projects across the country. But we also wanted to implement some monitoring programs, such as cameras, that might be implemented in a proof of eradication model, for instance. Biodiversity, that's bird counts, 5-minute bird counts, which we've started doing. We also obviously wanted to track customer relationship management. And this is actually probably one of the biggest components of our data management system. It's everything from people's personal information like phone numbers, right through to whether a property is accommodation and what day they usually have people visiting, for instance, the weekend. So the field workers can have a look and they've got a real good idea of who to call, gate codes, for instance, to get into the property. Health and safety, obviously that's a big consideration, particularly given that we've got primary productions such as cattle and wineries on the island. Cowrie areas we wanted to also make sure that we were aware of and monitoring, because Waiheke is actually carry dieback free. That hasn't been detected yet on Waiheke, and we want to keep it that way. And other aspects was community engagement. And we wanted something that was adaptable, bespoke, something that's quite intuitive and integrative. And I'm a real big believer in minimising data handling. So we went with Esri ArcGIS Online. And this is where Scott Sambell came in. He is a bit of a guru in this field, and he helped us out. It's Scott Sambell from Ethos Environmental, I should say. And this photo that you see on the right-hand side is sort of a bit of indicative of what a field worker would see, and how it sort of tries to indicate that it links in real time into desktop systems. So this gives us the ability to capture data in the field and send data to the field. It also gives us the ability for operational stuff with limited GIS capabilities or experience to track how we're going through dashboards, and then we can do deeper desktop analysis through other systems, ArcGIS systems, for instance. If you're thinking this is possibly cost prohibitive, I would probably suggest that maybe if you're a community group or a not-for-profit, have a look into it. There's Esri Community Conservation Grant, and the owner of Esri is very like-minded towards conservation. So it's definitely something to consider looking at, and Scott Sambell is a great contact to have. So after we built a bit of a system, we started developing it a little bit more. And this here is a bit of an interface. And the beauty, as I mentioned about this, is that people with limited GIS skills can come in and get the information that they need in real time, so we can track what we're seeing. And what we've got here is a customer relationship management interface. And across the top, you can look at the different tabs, and we've got everything from the actual eradication program through to trap data analysis, habitat data analysis. We've got biodiversity data, delivery partner data, and then we go into health and safety and carrying a whole raft of data dashboards that we have. So, for instance, someone like Jenny, who's our communications and engagement officer, uses this system quite a lot. And with all the work that she does with communicating to landowners and broader community, she can come in here and just gather info that she needs. You can see I've blacked out a little bit there. There's obviously personal information in the system. And this is obviously probably one of the most important dashboards that we have, trap catch data. Bear in mind, we've been open for about a month, and you can sort of see that tracking along here. So this down the bottom, there's a graph with a whole bunch of grey bars, and that's indicating how many traps per day we were getting. And as you can see, over a month, we were catching a number of animals, and then it goes to nothing when we close the traps. And in the top left corner, you can see we've caught 115 in total. And if you move across, in terms of stoke catches, we caught 12 up to the period before lockdown. And interestingly enough, we can also see this in the sort of geographical feature in the middle there. And while the data set is still quite low, interestingly enough, you can see that we're getting a lot of catches right on the coastline, which is something that's maybe to tease out a bit further down the track. We do things like catches within known habitat types. So on the left here, we've got a number of habitat types from Carnica scrub forest down. And on the right, we have the species that we've caught. And I'd probably draw your attention to the red dot, the stoat. And you can see most catches have been caught in the Pahudakawa treeland, flaxland, rockland, which makes sense if you think back to the last slide. That vegetation community on Waiheke is generally found on the coastline. We can do things like trap maintenance tracking. So we do random audits out on traps just to make sure they're functioning well and clean, and we calibrate them. So this is something, a snapshot in time over what the trap maintenance is like at the moment. Another slide that might be of real interest to people is a bird count data. So we conducted a 5-minute bird count in February this year, just before we opened the traps. And we had about 40 points, which you can see in the middle on the map there, across varying vegetation types, regenerating shrubland, coastal forest, inland forest, open pasture and urban areas as well. And during that time, we counted 2,596 birds, which you can see in the top left corner there. And just below that, we have a breakdown of the species that we found, that were cited. And the graph at the top above the map there, that's a breakdown of species and where they were found within those sort of broad aggregated vegetation types. And that brings us a little bit to the community engagement side of things. This is a snapshot from our website, and the beauty about the system is how we can share and integrate data with the community, and how the community can share data with us. And we have various ways of capturing this data, whether it be through phone calls and emails, and also a form on the website, which then goes and populates this. And people from the community can come along and see where the latest stoat sightings were. You can click on that graph down below, and it'll show you within the last month and where they were on the map. You can do it by year. And this is something that we're really excited about. And we're actually in the process of implementing bird sightings interactive map with the for the community side of things as well. So yeah, that's all. I mean, in a brief snapshot of the system, but it is quite powerful. And the beauty about it is how interactive it is, how integrated. So there's minimal data handling, and also things like that really increase the efficacy of the program. And I'll touch a little bit on the adaptability of the program as well, and the system, and that is, the reason for why we're all here is COVID-19. A lot like everyone else across the country and the world, going into lockdown, we were given a very short amount of time. So the decision was made to shut down all the traps. And within a few hours, we had adapted the system to be able to track field workers and where they were and how they were going with the trap closure. And this increased the efficiency of the planning and also the actual implementation of the work. And I'm happy to report that we got to our target, so we eventually got all the traps closed within the 48 hours. So that's pretty exciting, and just shows the adaptability of the program. So, yeah, thank you.